Well, welcome everyone to the April edition of our coffee break. I am Lettie West of London Scottish House, and I'm delighted to be joined by Graham McWilliam of Glencraft Luxury Mattresses. Hello, Graham.
Hi, Lettie. Thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us today. Looking forward to it.
No, thank you very much. So today we're going to concentrate on social enterprise and what the impact that it has on the community. So Graham, before we get going on that, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, I'm a career banker, I guess. I started my working career in banking many years ago. Too many to mention, I'm sure. But the first time around, I spent about 27 years in banking, latterly in corporate banking. And I think that sparked my interest in business as a whole. Um, One of the roles I had for 10 years of that career within the bank was monitoring the bank's exposure in the corporate markets, corporate and commercial markets. So it was a time when bank managers had some form of authority, and I don't mean that in any disparaging way, but when they used to be able to make decisions locally. My role at the bank at the time was to travel the country and monitor the bank's risk and exposure in these areas. So if I thought there was a deal or a lend that was particularly at risk, then I would highlight that. And my boss at the time always taught me that you'd see in this role how not to do things sometimes, which I think is a bit of life experience as well, isn't it? So I think that festered my interest in business at an early stage. I then had the opportunity to go on, much to my mother's disgust, because my mother was a career banker as well before me. So she encouraged me to go into banking. And it was a changed world then. You had to keep your jacket closed. You had to have permission for facial hair, etc. So all of these things, it's moved on, thankfully. Um, but after 27 years in banking, it was long enough, I think. And I stepped out of that comfort zone, much to mum's disgust, and went to work for a private company. And it was a quality management company. And really, I'd fostered a relationship with the guy that owned that company. I sat as a bank representative on one of his boards, and he asked me to come in and sort out a wee company that he had. So that was I did that for 18 months or so. That then, long story short, moved on to a kind of HR type company. Again, the aforementioned chairman had an involvement with an HR consultancy and asked if I'd want to start this up again. So to learn the ropes, I took a job for about a year or so with a national company. A bit devious, really, because all I was seeing was how not to do it. They had centralized their delivery. So I worked with them for a year or so and then picked all the best bits and started up ourselves. Started up a company called Empire HR in 2003. And that was really an online advice line service, HR consultancy. We grew that in 4 years from a standing start of 2 people to 35, I think. It was a busy 4 years. We bought out the aforementioned chairman. We bought another business. We bought a new head office. So it was a really busy time. And then I moved out of that. My co-director and I parted company. We went different ways. Essentially, I felt I was doing more than he was. So we decided, not all amicably, I might add, in the end to part company. And I had a 12-month restriction on doing all things HR again, having been a shareholder. So what do I do next? My wife was getting annoyed at me because she's a busy accountant, her own practice, working away at home, and I was not quite watching daytime TV. I would stand back from that, I guess, but I was filling my days catching up with people, trying to keep in the business loop, because it would be very difficult to lose sight of people and opportunities, perhaps. So after 6 months or so, I went back into banking again. RBS asked me to come in and head up their corporate development team. So I did that for 3 years. Strange time, really, because that was the time, it was 2009 by this time, I think. And it was the start of the financial crisis. So that big bank revolving door. I was the only one going in the way, everybody else was coming out the bank. But nevertheless, it was a bit of a challenge. We'd gone from a really busy time at Empire, where lots and lots happening, to maybe a handful of corporate deals every year. So it was a strange time, and I spent a lot of time looking at the clock and thinking, goodness me, is it time to go home yet? Not quite, but it wasn't far removed from that. I then made yet another mistake, and I've made plenty in my career. I moved on to another bank 3 years later for more money, really, and totally the wrong way to do it. Within a couple of weeks, I realised it was different letterhead, but just the same old nonsense I'd worked in before. So stepped out of that after 14 months or so. You can imagine both my mother and my wife think I've lost the plot now, because having been steady Eddie for 27 years, I've now flitted about a fair bit. I tell them it was finding the right job, of course. And that opportunity came when I was introduced to Duncan Skinner at Glencraft, chairman. And he asked me to come in and look after his social enterprise, a manufacturing company and a registered charity formed back in 1843. So I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about how we get into making mattresses later on. So that was that.
Thank you very much. That's a very great insight, and I think it is also important that when you make mistakes in your career and in your life, to acknowledge them, but you wouldn't be who you are today without them, and you wouldn't be where you are. So
absolutely, many more to come, I'm sure.
So what does social enterprise mean to you personally?
It's just about making an impact, isn't it? It's about making a difference. The social enterprise, Glencraft, for instance, our social impact is providing what we call dignity through work. So that's the phrase that we live by every day. We provide work to disadvantaged people that would otherwise find it really difficult to find employment. The model has changed, I guess, since Glencraft was formed, and we're 177 years old now. So established back in 1843, and that brings its own pressure, I guess. But in the early stages, Glencraft would have been a kind of training entity where disadvantaged people, and historically Glencraft was a place for blind people. It was known initially as the Asylum for the Blind, which just tells you how protocol has moved on. If you had any sight difficulties, you were shoved into what we called an asylum, because society didn't really know what to do with you. It's terrible. So, but more and more we've worked with all types of disadvantages. So we now have mental health issues, of course, with the pandemic over the last year or two has been exacerbated. Physical disabilities, learning difficulties, as well as a few people with sight difficulties. So that the Glencraft was used as a vehicle where they would come in, get a trade, if you like, work with us, and then be farmed out to the main workplace out in the big bad world. The harsh reality is that people don't leave. Now, whether that says something about the lack of opportunity or whether Glencraft's a weak place to work, I think a combination of both. We have Jenny has been with us for 47 years. We have a number of people that have been with us in excess of 30 years. So, but that's our social impact. Lettie is providing what we call dignity through work.
Wow, and I think that's quite poignant that people don't leave, but agree that there's probably a mixture of factors around that.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Duncan Skinner, who was until very recently your chairman, and unfortunately he passed away?
Yeah, Duncan's left a fantastic legacy. Duncan had a very, very successful career in oil and gas with Bob Keeler. Bob is well known to many, many people, of course, latterly as CEO of Wood and Scottish Enterprise now too. Bob and Duncan worked together. Glencraft unfortunately closed in 2009 for a 6-month period. Going back, it faced some real difficulties. It was run by Aberdeen City Council, and effectively, I'm sure they won't mind me saying, it wasn't run terribly well in hindsight, and it was making quite large losses. The council were back funding that, and you can understand why they pulled the plug, because it was a significant six-figure sum they were having to put into Glencraft every year. So unfortunately, after having traded since 1843, Glencraft closed the doors in 2009. And Duncan, having recently retired and wanting to spend more time in social enterprise, took the challenge of trying to get Glencraft up and running again. So with the connections that he and Bob had in the oil and gas days, they encouraged that sector to come and buy offshore mattresses from Glencraft, which was good. 2/3 of the platforms in the North Sea have a special Glencraft mattress that we designed on there. Now that's all great, and that got Glencraft back up and running again. It opened again in April 2010, and ever since then we've been a self-funded private limited company. So that's worked fine. The challenge we had, and I started on the 1st of April 2015. Remember the date well. 1st of April is never a good day to start anything new, I guess. But yes, by the time I got there, the oil and gas crisis had started. I'm beginning to think there's a pattern here. The financial crisis started as I joined RBS, and oil and gas crash around about mid-2015. Of course, if you remember, the oil price had dropped, I think, about $15, $20 a barrel, which meant that all of our customers in Glencraft weren't spending anymore. So my first 6 months just watched cash hemorrhage out the premises. Unfortunately, I had to put the business in a 3-day week. So that was nothing like a good introduction. Using that business experience and then having to cut our costs by reducing the staff hours. But it was necessary. Unfortunately, we came out the other end. But yeah, interesting times.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of other businesses around at the moment who are probably experiencing something similar, with a mixture of financial difficulties and furlough and staffing and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe you've missed this crisis in terms of moving to somewhere else, just at that time.
Yeah, hopefully we're delighted still to be here, of course, Lettie. And the well-used phrase of late was never waste a crisis. So we've been trying to do our best and look for new avenues, and we've been successful with some of the international work we've done. Again, we'll touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that obviously it's predominantly a manufacturing company, and it's about skilling those who would otherwise find it very difficult to find work. What is it about making a Glencraft mattress that is not just so skillful but also so important?
It's back to giving these people a purpose, I guess, isn't it? They've got a fantastic skill set. And I know how good the skill set is because in my first 2-3 weeks at Glencraft, I spent time in the factory trying to see what was involved. I think it was important for me as MD to understand the process. Let's just say that any mattress I was involved in making, we certainly couldn't retail. That it just wasn't fit for purpose. But it struck me how skilled these people are. We have Colin, who's been with us 37 or so years, I think. He's got no sight at all, and yet makes mattresses by touch. It's just fantastic to see. And 80% of what we do, Lettie, is to trade customers. So typically hotels, or in the past we would have sold to hotels, not so many this last year, as you'll understand. But hotels, guest houses, the Caledonian Sleeper train, that type of thing. 20% being retail. And it's tremendous to take those customers through the factory. That's one thing we've really missed this last 12 months. Bringing customers through and letting them see the quality. Everything we do is hand finished and bespoke, rather. So made to order. So we don't carry any stock. We're not trying to sell anything that's on the shelf and has been there for 6 months, 9 months. So whether it's one mattress for you, Lettie, or 50 for a hotel chain, they all start life as a bit of winner. And very bespoke in that basis, because we can make any size really.
Yeah, that's very impressive that people who actually can't see are creating something that someone with full all their senses and range of motion.
Yeah, absolutely. There are 2 ways I can find out what we produced yesterday. I mean, this morning I get an updated report from my operations team, or I'm just as quite going to ask Colin, because Colin, the chap that's going to cite it all, he keeps a braille record of every mattress he's made. Not only that, he'll tell me how we're doing compared to this time last year or last week or last month. So to have that commitment to go home and record it in braille just tells me there's real commitment to the job here and a real pride.
That's about it.
I've tried to catch him out, but he's very often right.
So talking about people like Colin, what do you think is the real impact of helping people like Colin get into a skilled place of work where they feel valued, taking that back into their own personal lives and in their local communities? What's the impact of that?
I think it's important to point out, Lettie, that Glencraft for these people like Colin, it's much more than a workplace. You know, it's a social life. Colin incidentally met Helen whilst he was at Glencraft. Helen works in our showroom, and they celebrated their silver wedding anniversary recently. So it's you can imagine not so much for Colin and Helen, of course, because they've got each other, but for the other 38 or so staff that we have, they're missing that just social gathering like we all are. But I think when you've got a disadvantage of some sort, it's just exacerbated. So it's we like to think of Glencraft as much more than just a workplace. We've worked hard with the team to try and just keep them on side these last 12, 13 months or so. I think it's worth pointing out that very few of my staff have access to email. Colin's one of the few who does. He's got many tools to help him, and he works tremendously well. Helen too. But for those that have some learning difficulties or physical disabilities, they don't want to use email, and they're uncomfortable with it. So we've had to gather them in small groups and just present to them and bring them back to the factory to keep them connected, I think, and make them feel part of it. Yeah, challenging times for sure for them.
That's really interesting, and that's made me think of what would you say is one of your biggest challenges as a social enterprise, working in an industry that is so saturated with, as you've already mentioned, having off-the-shelf options, but looking at the whole kind of life cycle as well as the product itself?
I guess like many businesses, we've had lots of challenges this year. It's trying to get that brand recognition and realise that we make a really good product. I don't want people to come and buy a Glencraft mattress because we're a charity. I refer that as the sympathy sale. You know, I've heard it a lot, so I'll come and buy a mattress because my mum and dad bought one years ago. That's great, but it's not going to change our world or secure Glencraft for the next 177 years. I want people to buy it from Glencraft because it is the best mattress available in the market today. I was going to use John Lewis as an example. It's maybe a bad example now, but you know, if you were to walk into John Lewis and buy a mattress and say, actually, I don't want that. Can you make it this size, or can you cut that corner off, or can you do this, or the salesperson, I suspect, will look at you like, you know, you've absolutely no chance of getting that. And that's a real benefit too. You know, we can tailor anything to the customer. I think the better companies that work with us have recognised that we've got much more to offer than just producing mattresses. We've changed our customer base, I think, beyond recognition now, taking advantage of the Royal Warranty. As you know from previous conversations, we've been fortunate to serve 4 generations of the royal family at Balmoral. And we're one of only 2 companies in our sector in the entire country to have a royal warrant to the Queen. And when I got there in April 2015, it was almost a well-kept secret. You know, the certificate was in the drawer. When we had a kind of staff session, it almost came out by accident. And I felt, with board approval, we just felt it was an opportunity we didn't really take full advantage of. So an extension to the Royal Warrant was granted soon after I'd arrived again. So you get it for a maximum of 5 years, 5-year period. And it's very much an application process. It's not taken for granted just because we sell to the royal family. Truth be known, they don't buy too much, but it's a good customer to have nonetheless. But they want to know now about your your green issues, how much fuel you're using, are your products sustainable? And you can tell, I guess, that Prince Charles has perhaps got an influence in that moving forward. So we, thankfully, we rebranded everything and used the royal warrant within fairly strict guidelines. And that's been successful in us changing that client base. We're now we're a supplier of choice to local 40 luxury group, the Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh, Browns in London, Villa Kennedy in Frankfurt. And it's been instrumental, that change, in producing luxury mattresses. Because for many, many years, we produced good quality, but classic, cheaper mattresses. And you're right to point out the competition, Lettie, was the whole marketplace changed significantly. 2015, when all these new entrants came into the market, so Simba, Emma, Eve, Loaf, they all send you a mattress in a box. Busy professional people like yourself, too busy to go shopping or try a mattress, because that's important. You order online, the mattress will be shoved into a box and vacuumed. You've then got to leave it 5 or 6 hours to get back up to its normal size, but it arrives in the post. Now that's convenience. Yeah, it's not for me to say or talk about the quality here, I guess, because I would never dish the opposition. But let's just say I'm a great believer that Glencraft mattresses are well worth their 10-year guarantee.
I'll come back to something that you've just said, but to circle back to something that you said slightly early on in that little bit was talking about sustainability and green issues, and how that is becoming not only to the royal family and the process of gaining and regaining a royal warrant, but it's also something that is talked about a lot more within the general customer base. How important do you think sustainability is for a social enterprise?
I think it's a great tool to have. We can demonstrate that the products we have, there is a future in it. There's a real challenge in finding good quality materials. We're fortunate that most of the materials we used are natural, certainly in the luxury products now. There's a move away from foams and synthetics, and I think the more discerning customer wants to see that too. So we use things like horsehair, mohair, cashmere, alpaca wool. An interesting story: when we did factory tours, I would let the customers or the retail client, whatever, let them see the horsehair pads that we use. Horsehair and natural materials are brilliant for wicking moisture away. We all overheat or tend to overheat at night. Unfortunately, we all lose a bit of glass, this much of perspiration every night into a mattress. And the natural material wicks it away. Horsehair is open, still, and hollow. So when we move on the bed at night, that condensation that we all use, and I'm being nice there calling it condensation, it gets wicked away through the 16 vents that we have, and horsehair does that. So back to my factory tour, I was showing the lady in question the pads, and there was a group of about 6 or 8, I think, from a local school, asking them for any questions, and one wee lad put up his hand and said, "Yes, what is it?" Said, "How many horses do you shoot every week?" So I don't think that would be a selling point for us, but of course, no horses were harmed in the making of a Glencraft mattress. It's just a good sustainable process. By the way, it's the best horsehair is taken from the tail, so it's just groomed on that basis.
Yeah, but that is, I mean, you raise a good point of animal welfare, and obviously, if one of your USPs is the natural fibres that you use, it's also important to tell the story that it's not a harmful process.
Oh, indeed, and we've got lots of blogs on our website too. So if anyone wants to check these out, so lots of good tips on there too about how to sleep well.
Yeah, well, that that's perfect, because that's what I'm about to come to. Talking
Yeah.
about the kind of the faster competitors that you've got, such as Eve and Simba, that come in a box and they rise over a certain number of hours.
Yeah.
The difference in the way that in the manufacturing process and how those are made and how yours are made must really impact on the quality of sleep, and how, and then therefore what the impact of a good night's sleep has on the customer, and how they then go about their day, and they therefore interact with their own communities. Obviously having a good night's sleep is a key goal for Glencraft.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think the better trade customers have recognised that by spending a bit more, because let's be honest, a luxury mattress it's a bit more expensive than you expect a classic mattress to be. But it always amazes me that people spend far more on a television or a three-piece suite than ever would on a mattress to sleep on. And yet we spend on average 7-8 hours, if you're lucky, in bed each day. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the obvious things about staying off your phone, etc. We all make that mistake, and I do too, despite us having videos and blogs on it. You know, the phone is plugged into the bedside cabinet, and you always look at it last thing and first thing in the morning, and it's just the wrong thing to do. And just the obvious things about avoiding caffeine and all of those things. Keeping the room well ventilated is always good, and that helps with that moisture loss that I talked about too. But I think the better customers, for instance, we created the first luxury offshore mattress suitable for the platforms. And one operator has purchased 1,100 of these to be drip fed over an 18-month period. Now, those mattresses were probably 3 times the price of the mattresses they were buying from us previously. So why would they do that? But they recognized that in a busy and dangerous environment, it was really important for their staff to sleep well and be ready for the task ahead. One of their key goals was to reduce the number of incidents offshore. And the management team, in conjunction with their health and safety people, really got that message about resting well and being ready for work next day. It's great. We all know that if you have a restless night, you're just not at it next day fully. So it's good to see that they recognised that and felt that the extra spend was well justified. So that's the message we're trying to get out there. Invest in yourself by buying a good mattress. It's really good advice.
Yeah, and you mentioned the idea of having a large order but drip fed over 18 months or so.
Right.
That kind of made me want to understand how long it takes to build. I mean, I'd say the word standard, but we've already discovered that standard is not it's not something that Glencraft does. But
Yeah.
kind of your average mattress, how long it takes.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, Lettie, because you'll appreciate that the mattress starts life as a bit of wire and raw material at one end of the factory, and then we add value to it as it goes through via the various workbenches. Sounds like a sweatshop. We're going to show you as far from that, and I would encourage everybody watching to come and visit us as and when they can. But if we were to start a luxury mattress from start to finish, it might take 2 days of one person from the beginning to end. And of course, we hope to have many models in various stages as we go through. We're not a huge producer, I guess. We would do maybe 5,000 units annually. We've got the capacity to do much more than that. I think with our lovely new factory, gosh, 2015 we moved in there just the week I started. So 6 years ago now, but it's still a new factory. All the hard work was done when I turned up. I just sat down at the desk and pulled the chair up, really. But yeah, so we've got capacity now for probably anything 12, 15,000 mattresses. So I always say to the team, if we get really busy, we can do a twilight shift. And if we get really, really busy, we'll think about doing a night shift, perhaps. But those are expansion plans for the future, possibly.
Yeah, And also that would then have knock-on effects of the rest of the business, changing the shift patterns and
Yeah, I mean that's a lot to think about there. But given the social impact and what is our aim as a social enterprise? We're a not-for-profit company. That's not to say we can't make profit. Of course, we want to make surpluses, but any surplus we make gets ploughed right back into the business. So that's replacing machinery, updating equipment we have, and that's a real challenge for a charity too. But more importantly, allowing us to employ more people. You mentioned Duncan earlier on, and one of the things we are going to do is introduce, I think, the Duncan Skinner apprenticeship scheme. Recognition for the work that he's put into Glencraft over the years, and keep his name alive by bringing young people in, because we need youngsters into the industry. They don't want to go into manufacturing. They want to be gamers or football players or F1 drivers and all that kind of good stuff. But when you ask somebody 14, 15 whether they want to go in and make mattresses, it's not seen as the most exciting career. But I can only go on some of the incredible people I've met in my 6 years at Glencraft. It's been a fascinating journey. We just need to enhance more people. Bit of a funny story, though. We were looking at succession planning just the other day as part of our risks, and our exec team has a combined age of 244. Now that's fine if there's 7 of us, but there's only 4 of us. So it's a bit of a challenge. But we've got to get young people coming in for sure. So
yeah,
I'll leave you to do the maths, Lettie.
I won't. But you're talking about needing to get younger people into the industry and encouraging them to look at manufacturing as not only as important as it is, because it is all about the supply chain. We need to have people making the products to start with, to be able to then have the F1 drivers and the footballers and things like that, because otherwise they wouldn't have a mattress to sleep on.
Well, exactly, and these are the people who should have them, of course, too.
Exactly.
Top end stuff, though. Top end.
Yeah. If we look at social enterprise as a whole, and how businesses who potentially don't see themselves as a social enterprise kind of proper, but want to increase their social impact activity, what advice would you give them at this stage, coming out of a global pandemic, hopefully lessons learned along the way, but is there anything specifically that you would say to them in starting to get onto that journey of looking at how their business is impacting those around them?
I think the first stage might be to find a social enterprise that they can interact with in their locale. And there are 700 nodes in Scotland for a start. So just look at that model. If you can bring on, I mean, our goal is to employ people, of course. So if you are able to offer an employment position to somebody that otherwise would find difficulty, there are many jobs that disadvantaged people can do, and I'm Colin is just one shining example. We've got many people at Glencraft that just haven't a hand to anything. They're really quite resilient, and I think just trying to be ethical and moving forward and doing the right. Glencraft, we always try to do what Duncan sought. He talked about doing the right thing and then doing that right. So he would pull me in check if I thought I was going too commercial. He would say, listen, remember why we're here again. We're here for the people. And it was very much about creating a model that would had sustainability and that would allow us to employ more people. And I think the advice to any company out there would be that if they can bear that in mind and have some form of social impact, if they're unable to do that, then try and trade with another social enterprise. It just makes such a difference. We've got campaigns like Buy Local, etc. If you can do that and use a social enterprise at the same time, and there are much more social enterprises out there you would first imagine. Some wonderful stories.
Yeah, just doing the basic research, you find out actually the people around the corner
Yeah,
The most amazing things. I mean,
yeah,
for example, I grew up in Braemar, not too far away from where you're based, and I didn't know anything about what was going on in a factory that I would have passed many times as a youngster. So um, there is so much activity for good that's going on around everyone. So it's just about looking and seeing what's already there.
yeah. No, exactly that. Like it was a well kept secret, I think, when I got there. You know, it was known within Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, but much beyond that, the reach just wasn't there. And of course, we're all now hugely proud that we're exporting to Asia. We have 10-year agreements with a wholesaler in China and a similar organization in South Korea. So, you know, for a tiny wee company in the northeast of Scotland, the social enterprise at that, to be sending what I term as world-class mattresses to the other side of the world was just fantastic. Yes, the Royal Warrant had a lot to do with that, and it kind of justifies our branding. Thankfully, the Royal Warrant was renewed again. Otherwise, I'd have to change my branding all back again. But, you know, they're a great supporter of ours. But yeah, you can imagine the Asians love the story too, and they really get the CSR bit. You know, the corporate social responsibility. They know that from buying from us and entering into a long-term contract, you know, that they're helping secure the future of that factory for the foreseeable. So I think we're well placed. We just need to wait for the hospitality and oil and gas sectors to come back now. So every month now we have a container of luxury mattresses going to South Korea, for instance, and slightly less to China. But the good news about that story is that as of November last year, we now have a Glencraft branded store in Hong Kong at the customer's cost, I might add. So an exclusive store in Hong Kong where retail space is hugely expensive. It's just surreal to think that a social enterprise in a poor part of Aberdeen has got a store in that area. We also have a mall presence in a mall in Singapore, a shop front rather. And the South Koreans are planning to open 3 Glencraft branded store areas too this year. So I'm really thankful for that because it's allowed us to continue and to employ people right through the pandemic crisis, or for the most part.
Yeah. So seeing as I mean, it's quite inspiring to have such huge growth globally in a way that has been able to, you know, take advantage of the Royal Warrant, but be able to prove that such a small business in, you know, as you say, the north of Scotland can do something that do business in Asia. That must be quite inspiring for a lot of other small businesses.
Yeah, I would encourage them just to puff their chest out and be proud of what they've done. You know, I tell our staff every day about, you know, the product we make is world class. They just have to believe that. You know, it's I said before, they've got a fantastic skill set. We just really didn't realise. We just had to harness it and get that message out there. And I said earlier, we've changed our customer base. We've got a much more discerning customer base now, so which is great. You know, Mrs. Polizzi, Olga Polizzi, is one of the leading hoteliers in the world, and buys from us. She comes to see us. You know, it's wow. You know, we get invited down to meet her and her team on a fairly regular basis, and she's just a great supporter of us. And it's a nice testimonial to think that one of the leading hoteliers trusts Glencraft to put our luxury mattresses in their key hotels. What better message do you?
Yeah, wonderful. So I'm going to slightly change tack for the last couple of minutes.
Yep.
And you've talked about Duncan and the kind of legacy that he's left and the impact that he's had on you. And maybe it's him, but what's the best advice that you've ever been given through the course of your life? It doesn't need to be business related.
Oof, that's a question you should have given me a bit of notice about.
No, I spring it on you.
I've touched on it before. I think doing the right thing and doing it right. is pretty good, and I think that stands in good stead. I've also found me thinking just this last couple of weeks, just what would Duncan do? You know, and I think if you have a role model to work with, that's really powerful. So the other one I've learned over the years is that the value of a service greatly diminishes after it's been performed. You know, so people might be at you to get this mattress done, or get it, I need it within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, etc. We'll pull the stops out. And let's just say there's been occasions where we haven't been paid for maybe 2 or 3 months after that. You know, we've changed our payment terms on that basis. But cash is king too, more so in these difficult times. It's nice to have a surplus and a profit, but even better to have cash. And it's the businesses who don't look after the cash flow that will suffer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's probably quite a few who've struggled over the last 13
Yeah,
months.
for sure.
If you could relive one day of your whole life, when would you go back to?
Gosh, another good question, Matthew. Gosh, you think there is. I mean, the cheesy one, I guess, is when your children are born, isn't it? You want to see that again. It's just fantastic. Their mothers had much more influence on them than I have. They're both accountants now too. So 3 accountants in our house, what a fun place that is. You can understand why I stepped out of banking, perhaps. But yeah, I guess somebody else asked me this recently when I was on a similar situation. I'd probably spent too long in banking. So if I was to relive that part of my life again, I mean, I don't miss the industry at all. I miss the people. There's a lot of good people that I still keep in touch with. And I think it was a great grounding for the latter part of my career, for sure. But maybe if I could step out just a bit earlier and not sit in that comfort zone. Because it's only once you do that step out, you realise you've actually got a great amount of training and a great amount of grounding from speaking to senior people, and that's even in good stead, I think, when I'm sitting opposite the Mrs. Polizi's of this world.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, what would you say you've learned about yourself over during the pandemic and over the last year?
First of all, it's been great to have a fantastic team around. You know, the exec team has pulled together, and we've worked really hard to bring the team along with us. I think we can do anything really if we set our mind to it. You know, I don't think any of us would have had the pandemic in a business plan. I certainly didn't, for sure. And you compare and contrast the feeling we had on 23rd of March last year when we went into lockdown. We really didn't know if we would come out the other end. But we have created a bit more demand for ourselves just by making the customer contacts and working on the international piece in the hope that the domestic market will come back. So never be afraid to try anything different. You know, if I had a pound for every time I heard, oh, that'll never work, or we've always done it this way, that was one of the worst phrases I heard continually in my early stages of Glencraft. Bear in mind, we didn't know who this guy was that was coming in. I'd never worked in the sector. I had a financial background. And one of my senior staff, who's since retired, but she said to me, I don't know what you're doing here. You've never made a mattress. And I'm sure that was meant to read, welcome to Glencraft. I hope you can help us. But, you know, so never be afraid to try and change things. We had a bit of luck along the way, for sure. But I'm a great believer in making your own luck. You've got to try something a bit different. The big challenge for us was when all these new entrants came into the market, Lettie. You know, we mentioned Sinbad, all of these people. Everybody was cutting their prices and racing to the bottom. That's difficult to do as a charity when you need money. We took the bold step with the board's support to pop our head above the parapet and go the other way, raise prices and create a luxury brand. So thankfully it worked so far, but we've got a lot to do still.
Yeah, a big risk, but worth doing it.
Yeah, a few sleepless nights, I think. I was always mindful the first day I started. My wife went across the breakfast table and said, listen, how are you feeling about today? And I said, well, a bit nervous, never having worked in that sector before. And she said, yeah, I know. She said, did you realise Glencraft's been on the go since 1843? I said, gosh, I know, it's a lot to live up to. and she went across and said, "Don't mess it up." So nothing like a vote of confidence. So so we're still here trying not to mess it up and just
Well,
make sure it's here.
I think that that's probably quite a good place to end. Just try not to mess it up.
Yeah, bear that in mind. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Graham. This has been a really insightful chat, and I've definitely learned a lot. We, as London Scottish House, are a social enterprise ourselves, and
Indeed, indeed. Yeah.
it's great to talk to other businesses who are driven by that need to do good and do the right thing, as Duncan would say, do the right thing in the right way. And I think that's really good advice to leave everyone here, everyone watching with. So I want to thank you again. Deepest respects to the team, and our condolences for the loss of Duncan a couple of weeks ago. So it's still very fresh.
It is. It's all about raw still, but yeah, it's a big driver for us, you know, to keep doing that right thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Graham, and I will speak to you again very shortly.
Thank you very much, Lettie. Appreciate that.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.